Boker Tov, today's daf is daf Chof Ches, number 28 in Gitin, as we learn for a four shlema for Elazar ben Ruma and Yosef Israel ben Chaim Michal. From the Mishnah, I maybe get like a man is a shliach to bring a get, and when he left the husband gave him a get to give to his wife. She's in Yerushalayim, he's in New York. So when he left him, though, the man was an elderly man. Now, if he was an old man, maybe he died in the interim. It's not like today where we have travel, you're here in 10 hours. Those days it would take months. Maybe by the time he got there, the man had died. And we have a call ein get la'achar misa. Now there's a big difference. If he's dead, there could be a question of yibum. His wife, if he had no children, there's a big issue, a big difference if he's divorced. Also, if he died before, there's no get, and she can marry a Kohen now, the wife, right? So it's a big issue. So what do you do? I maybe get benicha zaken ocholo, or the man was sick. No, it's not b'cheska shukayim. The assumption is Rashi brings down the Gemara in Chulin that there's a chazaka that he's alive. We have a presumption that things are the way you left them. If something was a certain thing until now, a chazaka woman was a pnuya, that she wasn't married, a chazaka this, chazaka. There's a presumption that things stay the way they are until you know otherwise. Unless, of course, there's reason to believe that things have changed. But otherwise, you assume, okay, he was an old man. A lot of people live a long time. Or if he was sick, most people who were sick recover. So you leave that, and therefore you can assume he's alive and give the get, and then she would be divorced and she can get remarried. Meaning, where would be a simple nafkamina? Nafkamina would be that if, let's say, there were no children involved, the man had no children, it goes by the man, the husband had no children, but he had a brother, and there could be a question of yibum. You don't have to worry about yibum. She can get married to somebody else. The assumption that the get is valid, that the husband is still alive. So the worst that can happen is that she married somebody even though she should have had chalitza first. But we don't hold like Rabbi Kiva. The chalitza does not produce if a woman who's a yavama marries somebody l'shuv. First of all, the kedushin's chal because it's only a lav. In other words, it's not like she was married and lived with somebody else. She wasn't married. She was supposed to get yibum chalitza, but if she married somebody else without yibum chalitza, well, it was done. Number one, it was done unintentionally. She assumed that she was divorced, and number two, the kedushin's chal anyway. So she'd be married to him. In other words, she did what she did, but based on that assumption, so the couldn't sweep down Mr. anyway unless you go according to the key, right? So maybe so that's the first one. You assume that he's still alive. Bas Yisrael and the Sulikon. Let's say another case where Bas Yisrael is a Jewish girl. She's not a Bas Kohen. She's married to a Kohen. He went overseas. Similarly, and this could be again, even if the man was sick or whatever. But here's this different case where Rov Cholim lived, and here the husband was a Kohen, went overseas, and if he died, she wouldn't be entitled to eat truma anymore, right? So the question, right? She's a Bas Yisrael. She wouldn't be entitled to eat truma. So the question is he died? No, she can assume he's alive. You don't assume that he died. That's another case. Could you go with the assumption that he's alive? Therefore, she can continue eating truma at home. Similarly, let's say a man who was overseas. We'll see if it's a man or a woman, but somebody sinned. They were overseas. They weren't in Israel. They still have to bring a chatas, so they sent it from far away, right? But the problem is if he died, one of the rules of a chatas that you let die. Remember, you lock the animal up and you starve him to death. It's one of the chatzmei salachim Sinai is if the Baal, the person who's supposed to bring the carbon, died. If he's died, you don't bring a carbon after death. You don't bring a carbon somebody after they died. So let's say again, the example is Medinas Yam because it assumed that it took a long time to travel. You sent you sent the animal from there, or you sent money from there, whatever it was, but it took a long time for the word to get here. By the time he sent the message or the shlichut, he sent the job to bring this chatas on his behalf was from a long time ago. Maybe he's dead now. Again, you assume that there's a presumption that he was alive then. You assume he's alive now too. So that's in all these cases we have this chazaka. We presume the man is alive. That's only a man who hasn't reached the age of 80. Now, don't smirk here. Things are a little bit different today, right? But that's if he hasn't reached the 80. Or if a man hasn't reached the 80, or most sick people recover. But once he's reached 80, or if a ghost says, or if he's literally on his deathbed, then we don't say that. And you have to be concerned that maybe he died, and therefore you can't just give the get. If he gives it, he can give the get, but you can't assume that the get's chal. It's possible that she still has to be, that she would fall yibum. And the same thing with the Kohen, etc. The wife eating truma. He said, "What do you mean? What do you mean? Just because he reached 80, it's a problem?" He said, "By maybe get the our mission. This is a brisa which says a man brought a get, and he left the husband. When he left the husband, the man was old. I feel about shana, even if the man was 100 years old. No, some of the cheskashu kayim. You can continue to give it, even if the man was 100 years old. You can give it the get. You assume the presumption is there, even if he was way beyond 80. He was 100. Tiftis takakasha on what Rava said, and according to this, Rava is wrong. Rava said once you reach 80, you have to be concerned. Doesn't mean to say that low, meaning low. We don't assume that he's alive. You have to be concerned that possibly he died. But here you say, Abaye brings out a brisa which says, even if a man's 100 years old, you don't assume that. If you left him and he was alive, you assume he's alive. It's different possibly if a man was a ghost says, but it's just if a man was healthy, even if he's 100 years old, you can assume he's alive. Or you could say, keep him the iflig. Another answer is once you saw that he was exceptional, once he reached the age of 90, then you assume that, in other words, in the 80s, maybe you got to be concerned. But once he reached 90, in other words, it shows that he's an exceptional person. And then he goes on, then you don't have to be concerned about it anymore. Rashi says that it's most people, don't make it up to 90. This guy, so far, he's already up to 100. You can assume iflik the enik kasharon. He's not like other people. Yos karvelamus. I'll ben shmona ba'achas o yoser ad tishim 81 to 90 karvelamus. So that's karvelamus. Again, that was in those days. We're talking, 2,000 years ago almost. Things are different today, and therefore, if a man was in good health, or like the brisa says, even if the man was 100, right? Not just if once he's past 90, you assume he's an exceptional person. That's the second answer to the Gemara. So the first answer is Tifta Tzakash on Rava, because many people live even past 100. A man was 110 and he was healthy and he sent a get to his wife. You can assume that he's still alive, unless you know otherwise. So in all these cases, there's a presumption. Again, today with communications, there's less sfeikot. Today, everybody can be found. Like we said, that today it's not. First of all, the iguna today is not the iguna. When we talk about the iguna today, the iguna of those days was, the man went on a business trip and he went to Ukraine or someplace, or from Ukraine to another, and he never showed up. Nobody knows what happened to him. That's an iguna. Today, it's usually what they call a siruv get. They don't really get, because that you can't find somebody is almost impossible. Today, almost anybody can be found. It's very hard to hide today. They have all kinds of, with cell phones and communications and all kinds of stuff today. The technology exists today. It's very, very difficult to get lost, So therefore, that's how things are now. So, but the Gemara is saying, basically, you can assume that he's alive unless the guy was on his deathbed. For a minute, what about this case? You say you assume he's alive. A man says to his wife, "Here's your get. I don't want you to have to fall yibum. I got my brother, in case there's no children. So I'm going to give you a get, and I want the get to be 1 hour before I die." Maybe the guy's only 40 years old now, but he gives her a get. He says, "Listen, I have a very simple solution. You don't want to fall yibum if there's no children. I'll give you a get now. It might be chal in 50 years, in 60 years, whatever. It should be chal 1 hour before I die." Which is say misasi, but that's how it's brought down. She can't eat truma right away. If she's a Ashes Kohen, can't eat truma right away now. If he's a Kohen, because maybe he's going to die in an hour. So what do you see? You are concerned. You don't go with you don't assume that there's a chazaka. So Amalei. So his answer was presumably, I mean, he's answering maybe Rava. Rava says. Low, but and we said maybe Kasha's on Abaye, because Abaye says man lives a long time. Amalei truma gittin. We're asking Kasha from truma gittin. Truma efsher get lo efsher. This case was speaking about a Kohen. Kohen told his wife, "Here's your get. It should be chal 1 hour before I die." So we say, okay, she can't eat truma anymore. There's no presumption he's going to die in an hour. Why do you say he's the Marstanas kasha with truma? So she doesn't eat truma. Big deal. Kohen can eat chulin also. Kohen has an advantage. He could also eat truma. So don't eat truma. Eat something else. Truma gittin. Gittin is different. You want to say that the get should be chal? Why do you say that you assume the guy's dead? That you don't say. You want to say that the get should be chal, and it's a question of eishes ish, etc. Get lo efshel lemechesh lemisa. Then in other words, he says, if you're always worried that a man, when it comes to a get given from overseas, so we say you can assume the guy's alive. What are you going to say? Just because by truma we say that if he gives her a get and says, I want it to be chal 1 hour before I die, she shouldn't eat truma from right now. So don't eat truma, big deal. But if you say that when a man sends a get from overseas or he's far away from his wife, and he said, well, maybe he died, then a man can never divorce his wife, and she'll always be in iguna. He's overseas, he's stuck overseas, he doesn't want her to be in iguna, he wants to give her a get. But if you say you always have to be concerned that maybe he died, so maybe it's to get lachar misa, or maybe he died, and we don't know. And she'll be in iguna in the sense that she has to go to yibam, because maybe he died and she falls yibam, and the get won't work. So don't ask a kasha from truma gittin. Truma efsher, she can eat something else. Get lo efsher. Okay, so ask a kasha from truma and truma. You ask truma. Tanan basra on still a coin balach bal nefshem. Our mishnah, right? A basra is married to a coin. Her husband went overseas. Ochelas betruma. No get over here. She can eat a truma. The question is, her husband die? No, we don't assume he's died. We assume a man's alive. He left here. He's probably alive. For a minute, what about this guy? The same kasha we asked from. Whereas from our Mishnah, we're asking on this price. The price is asking on a Mishnah. This price, the same price. The man says, "Here's your get." A Kohen says to his wife, "Here's your get 1 hour before I die." Asur lechol b'truma. She can't eat truma right away. Well, the Mishnah says she could eat truma. The man goes overseas. She could eat truma, right? She doesn't assume that he's dead. And here you assume he's dead. Amar Vada Barei. You understand? Our Mishnah said if a man's a Kohen goes overseas, his wife can eat truma. Yet you say if he gave her a get and said it should be chal 1 hour before I die, she must stop eating truma right away. Why? Why do you assume in the first case in our Mishnah that he's not going to die, and here you assume he's going to die? So this is a difficult question. So the Gemara gives several answers. I'm about to break it. It's like shani yasam shari aslav shachas kadam saso. Okay, not a real strong answer. Rashi calls that a shinuya dechika. It's a forced answer. He says it's different because there you don't assume if a guy just goes overseas, you assume he's alive and she can eat truma. But over here he says it should be chal 1 hour before I die. Well, we don't know when he's going to die, but still he's not going to die either way. Why is that an answer? Maskul Papa, the Gemara is even a better kasha. Maskul Papa, my inspiration. Why do you assume just because he said 1 hour before I die, and therefore, well, he's eventually going to die. So what? Maybe she'll die first. We don't know that the get's ever going to be chal. Elam Rabbi lo kasha, Rav Meir lo kasha. So this is really a difficult answer because our Mishnah says that a Kohen can go overseas and his wife can eat truma. There's no concern that maybe he died. Yet if he said to her, the Brisa said, if he said to her, I'm giving you a get, it should be chal 1 hour before I die. So maybe it's chal right, and maybe he's going to die in an hour, and the get's chal right now, and she can't eat truma. And that's what he says, chal truma. How do you resolve those two? So Rabbi gives a strong answer. It's very simple. It's a machlokas. You're right. Rav Meir lo chash misa. Our Mishnah goes like Rav Meir, who says you're not worried about misa. He's not worried that somebody's going to die. That's our Mishnah. Rav Yehuda chayish misa. Rav Yehuda is concerned about misa. Where do we see it? It's not the famous case of taking trumas and maestras on. Today we in other places after the Xavier we say that's on Shabbos. When Shabbos you're not allowed to take trumas and maestras on Shabbos. It's a tikkun of the wine. Let's say in those days it was lokech chaim ekut. You bought wine from kutim who were nechshar on maestras. So what do? You bought from kutim. What do? So you want to drink it now. Omer shnei lugan shani yased lahafresh. Right, you bought it from the kutim. Let's say it's right before Shabbos, and you want to drink it now. So you say 2 logan, 2 out of 100. Let's say 2 out of 100. I'm going to be mafresh on Sunday morning. I'm praying truma. Asara meiser, 10 is meiser rishon. Tisha meiser sheni. You give 9 for meiser sheni because what remains is 90. Right, 90 of the remaining. Besides the truma, 90 is remaining. Tisha Ma'aser Sheni, Umeichel, and you're machalid on money, because Ma'aser Sheni, if you don't take it to Yerushalayim, take the money to Yerushalayim. And you can drink it right away to Rav Meir. In other words, Rav Meir is not concerned that maybe the barrel will break, between now and Sunday morning. So he's not worried that maybe the guy will die. Just like he's not worried that the Kohen's going to die when he went overseas. He's not worried that the barrel's going to break. Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosef, Rav Shimon, Oshem, they forbid you to do it. Why? Because they're afraid. Not that, again, this is a question of Breira. We're assuming now everybody holds a Breira, but man for sure holds it. Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosef, Rav Shimon. Remember, elsewhere we had many times the Gemara proves when we once the premier that these rabbis don't hold a Breira. You can't say that the wine that I'm going to take out for Trumas Ramaisis on Sunday morning is the wine that I take. That's all the liquids mixed up. I can't just assign it and say that I'm taking 2 Logan is going to be Truma, 10 is going to be Ma'aser Rishon, 9 is going to be Ma'aser Sheni. You can't do that because you don't know which ones it's going to be. You don't hold a Breira. These rabbis all hold a Breira, but Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosef, Shimon forbid you to do it because maybe the barrel will break. Okay, so Rav Yehuda says maybe the barrel will break, maybe the guy will die. So now we're saying, according to Abaye, our Mishnah goes like Rav Meir is not worried about Misa. Cohen goes overseas, his wife could eat Truma. The one who says if he gives his wife a get saying it should be chal 1 hour before I die because he doesn't want it to be he doesn't want it to fall yibum, she can't eat Truma immediately. That's Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosef Shimon who are worried about possibly, they are concerned about that. Rabbi gives a different answer. Rabbi says, Shema Meis lo chashinan, Shema Yomus chashinan. You're right. The chazaka that says there's a presumption if a man's alive now that he's alive tomorrow, that's a presumption when you look at it right now. Right now, is he alive or is he dead? Shema Meis lo, we're not worried that he's dead. We're not worried that. But Shema Yomus, here's the concern. If he says, I'm giving you a get, and it should be 1 hour before I die in the future, then you are worried that maybe he's dead. Now, this is a very fine difference because it's almost, what's the difference? Is he dead now or is he not dead now? We don't assume Shema Meis lo chashina. You're not worried that maybe he died. But Shema Yamus, everybody's going to die in the future. Says Rashi, Shema Meisik mina chazak shenichu chai v'gavei kohen shalach mina siyam kivin shlo girsha. It's not necessarily limkei meis unless he died. So if a guy just went overseas, we don't assume that he's dead. But the case of the Brisa, where he gives her a get, it should take effect 1 hour before he dies. Also, the Shema Yamus miyad bade chashinan the lomar lechazaka b'hachi. Here's what he says. The Chazaka says he's alive right now, but maybe he's going to die in 5 minutes or in 1 hour. That you are worried. Maybe he will die in the next minute. That doesn't take away from the Chazaka. The Chazaka says he's alive right now. Is he alive right now? Yes, but he may not be alive in a minute. That doesn't go against the Chazaka. It's a fine difference that the Gemara makes. Amrulay, this is Rava's answer. Amrulay Rabba Bar Asam. The Rava, you assume that everybody holds Shema Meis lo chashinan, Shema Yamus chashinan. V'hanod, in the case over here with the barrel of wine, when you want to take the Trumas Ramaisis and eat it Friday and eat the wine, drink the wine Friday night, and you can't take Trumas Ramaisis now, so you're doing it for Sunday morning. But no, the Kashem Yamasu, note is like maybe the barrel will break. Or Pligin still is a machlokas and you want to say it's not a machlokas. Everybody holds Shema Meis lo chashinan, like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is not just for me. Our Mishnah goes like everybody. Shema Yamus chashinan. But there's a machlokas there too. Rav Meir holds even in the case of the barrel, you're not worried that maybe the barrel is going to break, that what's going to happen in the future. Completely, and still there's a machlokas there. So you can't say that everybody holds Shema Yamus. We are worried about Shema Meis lo chashin. Shema Meis lo chashin, yeah, that you could say. But Shema Yamus, like the case is that he's going to die, is like the case will the barrel break, and there's a machlokas there. It's different. A man may die at any time. Even if he's chaperoned, he may die. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. But the barrel, very simple. Put a guard there. Make sure that the barrel doesn't break. So the guard also needs a guard. The guard will be lackadaisical, and he will also or he'll fall on the job, or go to sleep, or go to the bathroom, or something like that. So maybe he will also be ineffective in preventing the barrel from breaking. You're right. Shema Meis, everybody holds up. Everybody holds the Shema Meis that we don't say Shema Meis, like our Mishnah. Shema Yamas, maybe it will die in the future. That already could be a machlokas. So the case of Shema Yamas, that in our Mishnah, the Brisa that said that if a man gives his wife a get and says it should be 1 hour before he dies, she can't eat truma right away, goes according to those who hold that Shema Yamus we do say. And Shema Yamus we do say. And that would be Rav Yehuda Rav Shimon, just like they say, maybe the bear will break, maybe the man will die. But Rav Meir doesn't hold of Shem Meis or Shem Yamas. Either one he doesn't hold. It won't go like the Meir. Yeah.
The difference is that the Baal says.
According to Rava.
What? That
According
the
to
Baal
Rava.
talks about his death. Is that the distinction?
No, the distinction is according to Rava. Let me say something. According to Abaye, I mean, the first answer Rav Yitzchak, Jerusalem Shachas comes to us, it doesn't really hold water. We don't know who's going to die. So Abaye gave an answer that's no, they're both the same. One is Rav Meir. Rav Meir's not worried about death at all. The other rabbis are worried about that. That's a very simple answer. Rava says no. Everybody can hold to the same thing.
Right.
That Shem Meis, there's a chazaka that the guy's alive. We assume he's alive right now. But if you're talking about the future, the chazaka doesn't help you for the future. The chazaka only helps right now. Don't forget, the halacha of chazaka is not just something we made up. It's something that the Gemara Chulin learns out from Sukkim. It's a deraisa, that there's a presumption, like there's a presumption of innocence. There's a presumption that you know that whatever was till now, we don't know otherwise. We assume the same thing. But what Rav is saying is, but about the future, we're not saying that.
But I'm asking what enacts that distinction?
The difference is the future or now. Are you looking at the present? The present we have to assume. The present we have to assume is just like the past. No, in a minute from now, or an hour from now.
What enacts that?
Okay.
No.
No. So he's saying because the chazaka doesn't help you for the future. Everybody who came to shul yesterday is alive, right? We assume they're all alive now.
I didn't come yesterday.
Yeah. The ones who came to shul yesterday, we can assume that they're alive today. Can you assume that nobody's going to die in the future? You can't assume that.
No,
Of course not. So just like you can't assume that they're going to die anytime in the future, you can't assume 5 minutes from now that they'll be alive. That's the difference that he's making. Yeah. Both cases are Cohen. Right. So the question is
why can eat
Truma. Why? At any time, because at any time the Chazaka says he's still alive.
Everybody might.
Right, but the Chazaka says right now that he's alive. Whenever she wants to eat, the Chazaka says. But if he says that it should be chal, the guest should be chal an hour before I die, talking about the future.
That's
The
what
future.
I'm asking.
The concern is the concern. That's what he's. When you talk about the future, you have to be concerned.
Because he is talking about
His future. Right. That's right.
So
That's the difference. That's what an exit. Correct. Right. Now the Gemara says, that's the third case of the Mishnah. The first case was that you left a man old or dying or whatever, old or sick. We say that's fine. You assume he's still alive. A coin goes overseas. You assume he's still alive. And according to Abaye, that wouldn't go according to the rabbis. Like Rav Yehuda, Rav Yosef, Shimon, they are concerned about that only according to Rav Meir, but according to Rav, the Mishnah go according to everybody. Then the Mishnah says, if you bring a carbon from overseas, meaning the guy's not here and he sends his carbon, you can assume that he's alive. Okay, says Gemara, Babina Smicha. How can you send it? How could you mail it in, so to speak? How could you mail in your carbon? A carbon, you have to put your hands on the Baalim has to put his hands on the animal, right? Yes, pardon? No, shliach can't do that. It's learned out of Psukim that only he could do it himself. Right? Bina Smicha v'tayim v'eskam yado v'lo yad b'no yado v'lo yad shlucho. Learned out of a pasuk. It's got to be you. You can't do it. So how does that work? How could he send in a carbon anyway? How could you mail it in? Or else a carbon noshim. Women don't bring a carbon. Women bring a carbon, they don't. The woman who sinned b'shogeg, she sent her chatas in. Pasuk is davel b'nei Yisrael b'samach. B'nei Yisrael samchem then b'nei Yisrael samach. Girls don't have to. Women don't have to be smicha. So one answer is that we're talking about a regular animal, a shogeg, but it was a woman, so there's no smicha. She can mail it in. But papam b'chatas oaf. We're speaking about a chatas oaf. Chatas oaf a bird doesn't have smicha, only an animal. Okay, two answers. The chatas oaf could even be a man. Now, why do we need all three cases? Said in the Mishnah, you can assume somebody, if the situation was that they were alive, you can assume they're alive now. Why do we have to talk about, in one case, sending a get from an old man or a sick person, another case with a coin going overseas and his wife could eat truma, we assume he's alive. Third case, a man sends his carbon, mails his carbon in, or a person sends his carbon in, you assume he's alive. Why do we need all three cases? Just say, you can always assume that a person's alive until you know otherwise. Why do we need all three cases? And get, because by get, what are you going to do if you say that the guy's not alive? That you always have to be concerned that the guy's dead. So every man will, you can never mail in it. You can never divorce your wife from far away because what are your choices? She'll always have to fall yibam, right? You're not going to be able to give the get. It's impossible, right? So it's impossible. So by get, maybe there we assume that he's alive because otherwise a man can never divorce his wife from far away, and she'll always have this problem. He's overseas. She's not his. She has no husband now, and she might fall yibam as well. Aval truma de efshar emelo. But truma, I'll tell you very simple. Why do you say you assume the Cohen's alive? Not in the case where he divorced her. A Cohen went overseas on a business trip. You assume he's alive. You assume he's alive. She can eat truma. Why does she have to eat truma? So eat something else. Eat chulin, right? She can eat regular food like the rest of us. So maybe there you don't want to say we're going to assume that he's alive. Don't assume that he's alive. Maybe he's dead. Mashma no. Even in a case where she has an option. Yes, truma does in the lecture. And if you just tell me the case of truma, well, possibly she's poverty stricken. She has no money. Truma is very cheap because truma can only be by kohanim. So there's a very small market. She can go to the granary and say, "Look, I'm a destitute wife of a Kohen, and get some truma." So maybe there you're makel and say you assume it's like avachatas a oath, or the gear says aval or the oath he takes out the oath avachatas mistake. Listen, you're mailing in an animal. Maybe the guy who mailed it in is dead, and if it's a chatas shemesu baleh, you don't bring it as a carbon. If you don't bring it as a carbon, it's chulun lazara. Maybe you have to be concerned that we have mistake a lot of them. Therefore, he tells us, no, it's not a suffix. You can bring it in. The truth is, if you're talking about a bird, chatas is bought. There's no chatas is bought al suffix anyway, and you're not worried about chulun lazara there. Chulun lazara is only by an animal. But let's say it's a woman who sent in the animal, right? So are you worried? Maybe she's dead, and maybe she died, and you can't bring this carbon. It's chatas shemeis baleh, and therefore it would be chulun lazara. If it was already, you're not going to bring it. If it wasn't already sanctified, then it's bringing the chulun lazara, or the sanctification is meaningless because she was already dead. So you shouldn't bring a chulun lazara. We're not worried about that. In all these cases, there's a presumption that the owner, the husband, the Kohen, whatever, the woman who's sending in the carbon, that they're alive. Shloshet Varim Amar Rabbi Elazar Park. Elazar Park said three things to take from. He declared three halachas before the Chachamim. The Kaimus Varov, and they confirmed his words. They agreed with him. What are they? Al Ir Shekifu Karkom. Let's say a city, Jewish city, was laid siege by Goyim. You assume but just because they laid siege, you don't assume that they were killed, that the people in the city were killed. Al Sfina Krevsiyam, or a ship that's foundering in the ocean. There's a big storm, but there's still a captain and the sailors are there, but they've lost control of the boat, of the ship. There's a big storm. You don't assume they all died yet. They're still intact. Sometimes the storm will die down, like in the case of Yonah. Or a guy going out to a capital court case, and he's about to be judged. In all these cases, you have to assume that the people involved are still alive. Just because he's going to court doesn't mean that he's going to be found guilty. Let's say the Goyim conquered the city. That's different, right? Conquered the city. Maybe the people are dead. Maybe they're alive. We don't know. You have to go. It's a suffix. You have to go l'chum in each case. Or the boat. It sank. Let's say it sank, or it fell apart. It got destroyed, capsized in the ocean. Or hayotzi lahara. He was already judged. A man was judged for death. Was sentenced to death. Right. Now we don't know for sure that they're dead. We don't know, right? We don't know for sure that, but you have to go l'chumra. And therefore, it's a suffix. You go l'chumra, you take the chumra chaim chamesim. What do I mean by that? Bas Yisrael a Kohen. If the wife was a Bas Yisrael married to Kohen, she can't eat truma because maybe the guy's dead. Bas Kohen Yisrael. Let's say a Bas Kohen. What's the halacha of a Bas Kohen who has no children and her husband married to Israel? She goes back to her father's truma. Can't eat truma because maybe he's alive. So you go l'chumra both ways. Both cases. Bas Yisrael a Kohen. That means you go l'chumra both ways. Then there's a 50-50 chance that he's dead. So you have to go 50-50 either way. You have to assume you have to go l'chumra in both cases. Now, what case? Now the Gemara is going to deal with the last case where after he was sentenced to death, do you assume he's dead or not? Amar Rav Yosef. Now we understand the case where the boat capsized, where the city was conquered. it's 50-50. We don't know if he's alive or dead, but there's a good chance that just as good chance that he's dead as alive. And we have to go l'chumrah. But the case of a man who was sentenced to death, well, can't you assume he's dead? Omar, why do you assume that maybe he's alive? A Jewish court could be that way. Because a Jewish court, even after he was sentenced, remember, there are cases where he was sentenced to death and he was being taken out to the gallows, and they sent a fast horse. Somebody came in with a excuse even after sentencing. They found some reason to find him innocent, and they go back and pull him back. Else, it happens in rare cases. So if Yosef says, let's only Bezdin Sheshol is 50. Bezdin Sheshol be clubbed by Goyim. Once he sends keeping the Gomerle, once they sentenced him to death, make the cultivate for sure killed him. So if it was a Goyish court and he was sentenced to death, you could assume he's dead. And therefore, if she's a Bas Kohen married to Israel, if it's a Jewish person married to Israel, and she's a Bas Kohen and there's no children, she has no children from him, she can eat truma now. She can go back to her father's house because you assume the guy and killed him. That's a good assumption. That's what Rav Yosef says initially. We're going to have two sheets of Rav Yosef. We're going to have a reverse opinion also. Why do you assume just because he was a Goyish court that he's for sure dead after sentencing? They take bribes. Go ahead and take bribes. Jews don't. Go ahead and take bribes. And maybe they bribed him to get him off. Porsi Shamak is like the sentencing, the document or the stamp of the Persian stamp that they only take a bribe up until it was stamped, like the verdict was confirmed. But after the verdict was stamped and signed, lo shaki, they can't take it because once it's signed, like he can't go get it's a death. He's a warrant. It's like a warrant for his death. They kill him. So therefore, right. Right. Yesterday they were talking about it was Purim, the Chav Gimel, I think it was in Chav Gimel Sivan, whatever, a whole big thing with the scholars. All right. So anyway, so he's okay. But the Goyish courts, if it was in the Goyish courts and he was sentenced to death, you can assume he's dead. In other words, l'chumra l'kula, whatever it is that you can assume he's dead. In other words, you don't say you take the chumras of Chaim and chumra Mason. He's definitely dead, and then you just take the chumras of the Mason. That if it was a Basra married to Kohen, she can no longer eat truma. But that Nisafik, you would have done that anyway. But the advantage is if she's a Bas Kohen married to Israel and there's no children, she can eat truma now. Meisvei. Okay, so that's what you say. But by Jewish courts, you don't assume, even after the verdict, you don't know unless you know he was dead. If he has evidence that he was killed, that's fine. But just because there's a verdict in the Jewish court, we don't assume that. Whenever two people get up, Yomru. The case was where a man was sentenced to death and he escaped, right? Mishlin Medina or Barchin ran away. Now two people come along to him, Yomru. We have testimony about this man, this escapee, Ploni. In this particular Bezdin, we saw him. We have testimony. We testify. These two people testify. We saw him sentenced to death in that court in Haifa. Ploni Adam, and there were two Adam there who saw it. These were the Adam who testified. We're testifying about the court case. There were two people. There were two good witnesses who testified about whatever he was guilty of that caused him to die. And as we're telling you the whole story, we saw two Adam testify against him. We saw him sentenced to death. You can kill him based on that testimony. So why do you say that if in a Jewish court, maybe the sentencing doesn't prove that he's dead? Here you see that just if two people say he can be killed based on that, so you assume now that he's dead. So in other words, that you can kill him based on that, and he's like a dead. If he ran away, that's different. Because if he ran away, if he fled, if he escaped, that's evidence of his death. And there you wouldn't find a hetzer. In other words, he can be killed without any concern that maybe they're going to find a hetzer for him now. Because if he ran away, that's evidence of his guilt. And ran away after he was sentenced already. So in a case like that, yes, you could assume afterwards they will kill him. He's got to be killed. In other words, there's no chance for finding him innocent afterwards. Tashma, he heard from a Bezin of Yisrael. Listen to this case. In a Bezin of Yisrael, he heard there that the Bezin said this person's dead. This person was killed. Yes, he was history. You can marry off his wife. And the Bezdin itself, Shema be Bezdin. The Bezdin said, the Bezdin gave out, it's like stronger than witnesses. They confirm this guy is dead or this guy was killed. You can marry off his wife. Mikum Teresen from the jailers of Goyim. So if you heard from Goyish jailers, the Ishpani Mace, Ishpani Nereg, you see his history. You can't marry off his wife based on what their testimony is. Now, my Mace and my Nereg, what do I mean by he was dead or he was killed? Either Mace Mamish Nereg means literally we heard he's dead or he was killed. The Kavaska by him. Why by Goyim? If the Goyim said that he was killed, why can't you marry his wife? If a guy speaks without an ulterior motive, they were in a bar and said, did you ever hear what happened to Yankel? Oh, Yankel was killed. We saw him killed. They weren't giving testimony. They had no ulterior motive. They just they just spoke, so to speak, in simplicity. They were just talking. They weren't giving testimony. And you believe them. So if a guy says, if these guys jailers said this guy's dead, why wouldn't they be believed? Why do you say, guy, if you heard from a Besson of Israel, the guy's dead, then you believe me. You heard from Goyish, they're not giving testimony. Why shouldn't they be believed? Elulav must mean Mace Yotzelim. Means he was being taken out to death. He was sentenced. Nereg Yotze, he was taken out to be killed. The kind of Besson Israel, you can assume. So you see with Ishto. So you see over here by a Jewish court, you don't assume just because there was a sentence that he's definitely. That you don't assume that there's a possibility that he's alive. No, I'm sorry. You don't assume just because he was sentenced he's dead. You see here, we said, Rav Yosef said, by a Bezin of Yisrael, there's a 50-50 chance. Just because he was sentenced, we don't know for sure if he's alive or dead. Right here, you see that if you heard from a Jewish court that he was going to be killed, that it was a sentence to be killed, he's taken out to be killed. You assume that you can marry off his wife. Just the fact that there was a sentence, even though you don't know that he was killed. No. Doesn't mean that you heard there was a sentence. You really heard that he was dead. You heard the Bezin said he was dead or he was killed. So why wouldn't you believe Goyish jailers? Why don't you believe Goyim if they say the guy's dead? They're just talking in simplicity. There's no ulterior motive. You believe them when they're talking in simplicity. Without an ulterior motive. That's something where they have no connection to it. They're not involved. In other words, they don't get anything by bragging that he's dead. They're just telling you a story. Yeah, that guy's dead. They will strengthen their line. In other words, over here they're bragging. They're bragging. Why? Because they're saying effectively, look, we killed this guy. We took him to court. We didn't just lynch him in the street. He was killed in our courts. We paskin for him. The truth is, we're talking about they're only sentenced to death, right? But the goyim are not believed when they say he was sentenced to death, right? You don't marry off his wife because they could just be bragging about their court system. And they might have an ulterior motive over here. There are many cases when a man was thought that a woman was a iguna, and they found some drunk guy in the street. Then he said, did you see what happened over here? Yeah, that guy was killed. Then you might believe me. He's not giving testimony. He's just like talking. There you believe him. But over here, they might be bragging. These are jailers bragging about their court system. They killed him properly. They could be bragging, and therefore he's not necessarily dead. So if a Jewish court says this guy's dead or he was killed, you believe him. Right, but if a goyim said this guy was killed, don't necessarily believe him. Yeah, I might just be bragging. Okay, so according to this, Rav Yosef still stands. Rav Yosef said when our Mishnah says that you give him the chumras of both, the 50-50, maybe he's dead, maybe he's alive. That's only on Jewish courts. But Goyish courts, once they give a psak din, you can assume that he's dead. You can assume that he's dead. Okay, but the Jewish courts, even though it's a psak din, if we're not talking about what he said. Jewish court said he's died. Jewish said he died, he's dead. Goyish courts, even if they said he died, we don't believe them. Speaking right there, believe them. We don't give them the testimony. But if there was a Jewish verdict, we don't know for sure that he's dead. Maybe they found some schus for him afterwards. In a Goyish verdict, he was definitely killed. Now he said in the last line of the page that Rabbi Yosef says exactly the opposite. By Goyish courts, even though it's a verdict, even after the verdict, they bribe him sometimes. Even after the verdict, the judges found him guilty. You bribe the hangman over there, and you got him out. Av Bezin Shei Yisrael, but of a Jewish court, Kivan Nafal גיטין L'Tala. Once there's a verdict, partly they kill him, right? Right? They kill him. If there's a Jewish court, you definitely kill. You say, wait a minute. There are cases where you take the horse and you run after the guy's on his way out to the gallows. That's a rare case. In most cases, lo shchiach, right? Lo shchiach. Gemara asks, Abai says, even after the verdict, that somebody came with some report of innocence, they found some reason to find him innocent, right? The Gemara says, that's before the Gemara din. Basar Gemara dina, after the verdict, they don't find him innocent. And again, this is what Rashi says, it's not shchiach, it could happen, but it's not very often it's going to happen. And therefore, you can assume, says Rabbi Yosef, that if a bezdin of a Yisrael sentenced him to death, you can marry off his wife. There are rare cases, but we don't look at the rare cases. We go basarov, and his wife doesn't have to be nigun, he can marry off. Now the Gemara is getting the same cases, but reverse. Before we said it as a kasha under Rabbi Yosef. Now the Gemara is going to try to prove that. We're saying now in a Jewish court, if there's a sentence, you assume he's dead. You marry off his wife. Two people get up where the guy escaped. Remember the person involved, the murderer or whatever he was, right? The person who was being judged. Two people get up and say, and he escaped. So we give testimony that this guy is Ishplanish Nigma did a Bezdin Shopani in Haifa. We saw it take place in Bezdin, that he was sentenced to death. And these were his witnesses who testified against him. He's be killed. So what do you see over here? That is, if there's testimony and or you know that based on testimony, you know that he was sentenced to death. He's supposed to be killed, and therefore you would be able to marry off his wife. You kill him based on that. Gemara says, so it's a proof to what Yosef says by a Jewish court. If there's a sentence, you follow through with the sentence if you have the ability to, if the guy didn't run away. Gemara says, that's different over there because he showed his guilt by running away. There's evidence of his guilt by trying to escape. But in a regular case, you can't prove it. So we'll prove it from that next case, which we also had before on the base. Tashma, if a Jewish court says, look, this guy's dead, this guy was killed, then you see you can marry off his wife. If you heard from the Goyish jailers, you don't marry off his wife. You don't believe them. Now, what do you mean? Again, the same thing. If you mean that he literally was dead, so why when Goyim say that? Don't you believe them? Why can't you marry off his wife? The Goyim believe when they speak with no ulterior motive and just speaking matter of factly. We're not talking about where they're giving testimony that he's dead. They're giving testimony that he was sentenced to death, right? But yes, they should marry off his wife. That's a proof to Rav Yosef is saying now that by a Jewish court, once they sentence him, you can assume his wife is that he's dead and his wife is allowed to marry. That's what we're speaking of over here, where it's such a verdict. And we're talking about where they're just talking about the verdict, right? There's a verdict of because if they're literally talking about that he's dead, why don't you believe the Goyim? Same answer. No proof from here. No proof to what Rabbi said. Could be that they're talking about where the Bezdin said he's dead, not that we forgave him a verdict of a sentence of death, but he literally is dead. So why aren't Goyim believed to say that he's dead? But when the Goyim are speaking matter of factly, simplicity, without an ulterior motive, they should be believed. That's something where they're not involved in it. They're just talking in the street. Did you hear about Yankel? Oh, he's dead. I saw him dead. Al Mr. Shachabed, when these are jailers of the court, these are the jailers of the Goyish court. There they want to. They strengthen their lies. In other words, they want to brag and say, "Oh, we had a verdict over here. He was killed. Therefore, they're lying." So when Jewish courts say he's dead, he's dead. When Goyim say Goyish jailers say he's dead, we don't necessarily believe him. But this second opinion of Rav Yosef is the way the Rambam paskins. That Rav Yosef says that this our Mishnah says that if they were taken out to be killed, there was a sentence that he's going to be killed. Right? There's a sentence going to be killed. It's a 50-50 chance. We don't know if he was killed or not, even though he was sentenced. That's only by Goyish courts. By Goyish courts, yeah, there's a chance they killed him. There's a chance that they took a bribe and didn't kill him. But by Jewish courts, once he's sentenced to death, you can assume that he's dead. Not 5 minutes later, but a few days later. By Jewish courts, there's no death row for 20 years like in Texas. They're killed immediately. So unless there's a rare case where you find some innocent thing, but we don't rely on that, you can assume a day later or a week later that his wife is free to marry. All right, picking up the Mishnah tomorrow. Mention. Have a good day.
Beautiful.
Pardon, what? Yes, wait 3 months anyway. Correct. But that, yeah. No, but even if you don't know, Let's say you don't have communication. She's far away. As long as she waits 3 months, she can get remarried. The truth is, if she didn't wait 3 months, it's not a question of mamzeres. It's only a question of who the father is. The point is that she can get, you allow her to get remarried, immediately, except for the 3 months. But that's only for Chanazera, not for moms or anything like that.